He kissed me as if he had just discovered some secret desire his throat tightened as his fingers moved beneath the hem of my underwear and explored the exposed flesh between my thighs. Welcome to the euphoric moments of love. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments section, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. Wishing you enjoyable, relaxing moments. Thank you. Gather round as I share the unexpected tale of the moment. It started with a kiss, unexpected, deep, like he had just discovered something inside him he never knew was there. His touch moved beneath the hem of my underwear, his fingers warm and trembling. I should have pulled away. I didn't. The house was quiet, the way I liked it. I had just stepped out of the shower. Steam clung to the mirrors like smoke. My skin was still damp as I reached for my old towel, the one I always used when no one was home. I stood there, bare and calm, brushing my fingers through my wet hair. Then I felt it, someone watching. I turned. He was in the doorway. Lucas. He just stood there, hand on the doorknob, not moving, barely breathing. He wasn't supposed to be there. And yet, neither of us said a word. He looked at me, not just at me, but into me. And somehow, I couldn't bring myself to cover up. Something in his eyes held me still. His name caught in my throat. Lucas, the man my daughter loved, the one who had called me ma'am the first few times we met. Now he stood frozen, looking at me like he had seen something forbidden and beautiful. I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice soft and shaky. Still, he didn't move. Neither did I. Then, as quickly as it started, it ended. He closed the door and walked away. I stood there, towel clutched to my chest, heart pounding, not from fear, but from something else entirely. Desire. Guilt. Longing. That night, I lay awake in bed. The sound of my husband's snoring came from down the hall. But my thoughts weren't with him. They were with Lucas. I remembered the way he looked at me, how his eyes had wandered across my skin, not with shame, but with awe. I squeezed my legs together, trying to forget the heat that had settled there. I couldn't. The next morning, he didn't meet my eyes. Neither could I. My daughter laughed beside him, talking about wedding plans and cake flavors. But Lucas stared into his coffee, quiet and far away. When I placed a plate in front of him, our fingers brushed. Just for a second. But that second felt like a lifetime. That afternoon, we crossed paths again in the hallway. His hand brushed against my hip, soft but full of meaning. I told myself it didn't matter. But it did. That evening, the house grew still again. My husband buried himself in work. My daughter was on a call in her room, giggling behind closed doors. I went downstairs, poured a glass of wine, my robe whispering against the silk of my nightgown. Lucas sat in the living room, eyes on the screen, lost in thought. Then he saw me. His eyes met mine and stayed there. Neither of us spoke. The silence between us stretched, full of things we couldn't say. You looked beautiful this morning, he finally said. I swallowed hard. You shouldn't say that. I know. His hand brushed my arm, light and unsure. I turned to him. His eyes lingered on my lips, then drifted lower. Still, I didn't stop him. When he kissed me, it was soft but full of ache, as if he was mourning a love he was never allowed to have. His hand slipped under my robe again, warm and careful. I whispered his name. He hesitated. You're not wearing anything under this, he breathed. No, I said quietly. We kissed again, deeper this time. My fingers wrapped around his wrist and guided him to where I ached for him most. He trembled. Please tell me to stop, he whispered. I didn't. That night, we stood at the edge of something dangerous, something wild. But a sound from upstairs, my daughter's voice, pulled us apart. He stepped back. I fixed my robe. We didn't speak. He left. In bed, I stared at the ceiling, the scent of him still on my skin. Sleep never came. I closed my eyes and saw his face. I relived his touch. The next few days, we avoided each other. But even then, I could feel him, his gaze following me in silence. He kept his distance, but the air between us always felt heavy charged. One afternoon, while I was folding laundry, he walked past and let his hand brush my waist. It was gentle, familiar. We didn't talk about it. but we both knew what it meant. Then came the weekend. My daughter left for her bachelorette trip. The house was quiet once again. Just the two of us. I opened a bottle of wine. Lucas appeared barefoot, in a fitted gray shirt, his hair messy and damp. He poured himself a glass and sat across from me. His eyes didn't leave mine. When I got up to take my plate to the sink, he followed. No words. Just movement. He leaned in, lips grazing my shoulder. Your voice stays with me, he said. Lucas, I whispered, my hands gripping the counter for support. He turned me around slowly, kissed me again, deeper, fuller. Then he lifted me onto the counter, parting my legs gently. His lips pressed against my thigh, reverent, almost afraid. You taste just like I imagined, he murmured. I ran my fingers through his hair, gave in to the feeling, let it carry us both. He kissed me like he would disappear if he didn't. I unbuckled his jeans, letting him go, letting him in. When he moved against me, it was slow and certain, like he'd waited forever for this. Tell me, I whispered, what is it you want? You, he answered. All of you. And so, I gave myself to him completely. The clink of a wine glass echoed nearby, and the sound of his breath against my skin was like music. For a moment, we were lost in a world that wasn't ours. We came undone. After, he leaned his head on my shoulder. We're in trouble, he whispered. I know, I replied. But I don't want to stop. The next morning, I made 2 cups of coffee. I left his on the counter and waited. He appeared minutes later, silent, barefoot, his eyes tired. He looked at the coffee, then at me. Just a nod. No words. A quiet agreement between 2 people who had crossed a line they couldn't uncross. The air was heavy with everything we hadn't said. Every time our hands touched, something inside me stirred. I offered help I didn't need to. I stayed near him when I should have left. In the hallway, I dropped a spoon. We both bent to pick it up. Our faces met, too close. We froze. Our lips met again, fast and breathless. We didn't speak. That night, in the quiet dark of the hallway, we gave in once more. It began with a breath, a soft glance, a touch that lingered. Then, without speaking, his hands reached for my clothes, tugging gently, urgently, as if afraid the moment would slip away. Before either of us could even form a clear thought, he pressed me gently against the wall. His lips met mine, and his hands wandered with a hunger that was quiet, yet overwhelming. In the stillness of the night, he leaned closer and whispered, You are the only thought that lives in my mind from the light of morning to the last shadow of night. Even when I'm holding her, my heart aches for you. I should have stopped him. I should have told him to go. But instead, my fingers reached down, undoing his jeans. My hand found him, warm and waiting. He let out a deep groan into my mouth, a sound like something he had been holding back for too long. He lifted my leg gently around his waist, his fingers trailing slowly between my thighs. I gasped softly at his touch. Jesus, he breathed, your spirit flows through me like a gentle stream. A quiet sigh escaped me as I melted into his warmth. I bent his touch like a flower leaning toward sunlight. From the moment our eyes met in the mirror days ago, something had awakened in both of us, something deep, unstoppable. That longing broke something inside him. Without words, he lifted me in his arms and carried me down the hallway. He pushed open the guest room door with his shoulder, just enough, and we tumbled onto the bed. In that moment, we gave in completely. Our lips, our skin, our hearts tangled together with a need that could not be denied. There was no teasing, no laughter, no hesitation this time. Only silence, breath, and need. I welcomed every part of him. Every movement, every breathless moment that made the headboard thud against the wall. He groaned deeply, lost in the feeling between us, and I held on to him as if I might disappear without his touch. Your spirit shines so bright, he said softly, his voice breaking, and my heart shakes thinking that our time is almost over. I swallowed hard, my breath catching. Then don't speak of time, I whispered. Just stay with me. He raised my hands gently, pinning them above my head. Our bodies moved together in rhythm, like a song written only for us. Sweat mixed between us, and our breath became one fast, heavy, and full of yearning. We clung to each other as if we were trying to sink into each other's soul. And when the rush passed, we lay still, wrapped in the quiet, looking up at the ceiling like it might hold answers we were too afraid to ask. His hand found mine. Warm. Sure. Then he whispered with a soft smile. Only 2 more nights remain. His voice carried a weight of sadness and hope. The next morning came too quickly. Sunlight slipped through the curtains and painted golden lines across the bed. I lay still, eyes open, his words from last night echoing in my mind. Only 2 more nights remain. I turned slowly. The space beside me was empty. He was gone. But his warmth still lingered on the sheets, and the scent of his skin stayed with me. I pulled the blanket closer, closing my eyes, trying to hold on to the feeling just a little longer. Downstairs, the sound of a kettle boiling pulled me from the moment. I dressed quietly, smoothing the fabric over my body, and tied my hair back with shaky fingers. Each step down the stairs felt heavy, like the weight of what we had done was pulling me down. He stood in the kitchen, his back to me, stirring a cup of tea. He turned when he heard me, his eyes finding mine for a brief second. There were no smiles, just silence. I made you one too, he said, sliding a cup across the counter. Thank you, I whispered. I reached out, and our fingers touched again, just for a moment. It still made my breath catch. We sat at the table like strangers, pretending to be normal. I watched him, how he stared into his cup, how his shoulders moved with each quiet breath. What happens when she comes back? I asked softly. He looked up, and I could see the sadness in his eyes. I don't know, he said. I just know I'll miss you more than I thought possible. I looked away, tears stinging the back of my eyes. I had no right to cry. She was my daughter. He was her future. And yet, I had let him into places no one else had touched. We spent the day apart. He stayed outside in the garden, pretending to read. I stayed inside, folding clothes, wiping counters that didn't need wiping. Anything to stop thinking. Anything to keep my hands busy. That night, I stood by the window, the moonlight soft on my skin. He walked in slowly, his steps careful, uncertain. Without speaking, he stood behind me, his hands resting gently on my arms. I wish this was enough, he whispered into my hair. I closed my eyes. Me too. For a moment, we just stood like that, 2 people holding something fragile between them. The world outside was silent, but inside us, everything was loud. We didn't make love that night. We just held each other, breathing in the sadness, the guilt, and the impossible feeling of love that had bloomed in the wrong place at the wrong time. And we knew tomorrow would come. And with it, only 1 night left. The final day felt heavier than the others. Every word, every glance between us carried the weight of goodbye. We both tried to act normal, but silence followed us everywhere. I made breakfast, placing the plate in front of him like before. He murmured a quiet thanks, but didn't meet my eyes. His fingers brushed mine again, and even that small touch made my heart ache. Outside, the sky was gray, as if it understood what was happening inside the house. I sat by the window for hours, pretending to read, pretending not to look at the clock. In the afternoon, he sat across the room, scrolling on his phone. But I knew he wasn't reading anything. His mind was somewhere else. Probably with me. Just like mine was with him. Later, I found him folding my laundry without being asked. He didn't say why. I didn't ask. The way his hands touched the fabric, gentle, careful, it said more than words could. By evening, we had run out of distractions. We stood in the hallway, neither of us moving. The quiet wrapped around us like a secret. I hate that this has to end, he finally whispered. I nodded slowly. Me too. But we both knew it couldn't last. He stepped closer, lifting his hand to brush my cheek. His touch was soft, full of sorrow. I've never felt this with anyone, he said. Not even her. Tears welled in my eyes. I didn't want to hear that. But it was the truth, and truth always hurts. She loves you, I whispered. You'll make her happy. He rested his forehead against mine. But you woke something in me. I couldn't speak. My throat was tight with emotion. That night, we lay together one last time. Not to satisfy desire, but to hold each other like two people trying to remember how it felt to be seen, to be wanted. His arms wrapped around me, his chest rising and falling against my back. We didn't say much. We didn't need to. The silence said it all. He kissed my shoulder, slowly, tenderly. "I'll carry this with me," he whispered. "Always." And I knew I would too. Even when this ended, even when he left, I would hold this time in a quiet place inside me. The morning would come, and she would return. The house would go back to normal. But I would never be the same. I closed my eyes, letting the last night wash over me. One breath, one heartbeat, one goodbye at a time. Morning came too soon. The light outside felt sharp, like it was trying to wake us from a dream we didn't want to end. He wasn't beside me anymore, but I could still feel him, his warmth, his breath, his sadness. I stayed in bed longer than usual. The sound of his footsteps downstairs reminded me that it was real, and today was the day she would come back. Our time was over. I finally got up, dressed slowly, and went to the kitchen. He was there, pouring himself coffee, his face quiet and unreadable. He glanced at me briefly but didn't say a word. "I'll clean the guest room," I said softly. He nodded. "Thanks." That was all. No touch. No closeness. Just space. The house was quiet, heavy with the silence we both understood. We moved around each other like strangers. But inside, we were anything but. That afternoon, her car pulled into the driveway. She stepped out, smiling wide, her arms full of bags and stories. Her laughter filled the hallway like sunshine after a storm. She hugged me first. "I missed you, Mom." Then she turned to him. "And you? Did you behave while I was gone?" she teased, kissing his cheek. He smiled, polite, small, but his eyes didn't shine. "Yes," he said. "Of course." We sat together for dinner. She talked the most. She told us about her weekend, her friends, her dress fitting. I smiled. I listened. I nodded. But my chest felt hollow. He barely touched his food. He kept his eyes on his plate, only glancing at her when she looked his way. At one point, she leaned her head on his shoulder. He stiffened just a little, only for a second, but I noticed. My stomach turned. After dinner, she showed me photos from the trip. He stayed behind in the kitchen, washing dishes slowly, lost in thought. Later that night, I passed him in the hallway. He stood still for a moment, as if wanting to speak, but then walked past me in silence. I went to my room, closed the door, and finally let the tears fall. They were quiet tears. Not from regret, but from knowing what we had was over. The next morning, he left early. He told her he needed to visit his parents. He didn't say goodbye to me. She waved from the porch. "Drive safe." I stood by the window, watching him go. He didn't look back. And just like that, the house felt normal again. But I wasn't the same woman anymore. I had lived something unforgettable, something both beautiful and painful. Now I carry it quietly inside me. A secret buried beneath smiles and silence, and 2 nights I will never forget. I decided to hold my tongue. Deep inside, I knew I would carry every moment with him like a treasure buried beneath my skin. The next morning, I pulled the curtains aside. Outside, a storm raged. Rain tapped gently on the windows, and the wind danced through the trees like a quiet song. Nature moved with grace, even in chaos. A photo arrived from my daughter. She stood by the sea, smiling wide under a glowing sun. The golden sand and waves behind her made the moment feel warm and alive. Her joy was pure, unshaken. Her smile held me still. It pulled something inside me, something soft, something broken. She looked like I once did, before guilt, before regret carved lines into my heart. As evening fell, I stepped into the rain. The cold drops touched my skin like little whispers. Barefoot, I moved down the porch steps and into the yard, letting my shirt cling to me. I welcomed the sting of it. It felt like truth. Behind me, I felt him, his presence. The door shut softly, his footsteps echoing in the grass. "Why do you keep letting me in?" he asked gently. "I'm tired of pretending I don't want more." His hand brushed my soaked shirt, fingertips warm. He pulled me gently toward him. We were barely dressed, our bodies trembling beneath the weight of the moment. His lips met mine slow, deep, like he was learning me all over again. The rain poured harder, but we didn't move. He peeled the wet fabric away from me, kneeling softly at my waist, his lips exploring the edges of skin, my stomach, my hip, my thigh. Every kiss spoke of need and apology. "I want to do this right," he whispered. And this time, he did. He laid me down in the wet grass, holding me like I was something he wanted to protect, not just touch. We thought it would end in that storm. But it didn't. That night grew longer. Our story stretched further into places neither of us had prepared for. Later, we stood at a crossroads. Between recklessness and courage. Between love and truth. We believed, maybe foolishly, that desire could build something strong enough to survive reality. That night, wrapped in silence, I let go. I invited him to the pantry with me, where we brushed close again. When his hand touched my back, I kissed him hard, pulling him into the space I had tried so long to guard. He lifted me gently onto a shelf. His fingers found me again, slow and desperate. "You're always there," he whispered, trembling. "In you, the world disappears." We moved together in breathless silence. It felt dangerous, beautiful, almost timeless. Until a sudden knock at the kitchen door. We pulled apart quickly, breathless, like children caught in the dark. He zipped up and left quietly as if nothing had happened. But everything had. After that night, something changed. His silence grew louder. I longed for his voice, even when I wasn't wrapped in his arms. The ache stayed with me. We found each other in secret places. The back seat of his car near the woods. A stairwell dimly lit after dusk. Even in the guest bathroom upstairs, where I knelt down in quiet surrender. "You're not real," he breathed once. His eyes locked onto mine, full of wonder and fear. "You make me see the part of myself I try to hide." And in those moments, I absorbed it all. Every glance, every breath, every silent cry hidden behind his steady voice. The days passed slowly, each one quieter than the last. He was still there, but something had changed. His touches were fewer. His eyes didn't hold me the same way. A space was growing between us, and I didn't know how to stop it. At dinner, he sat beside her, laughing softly, playing the role of the man she believed he was. I watched them from across the table, my heart twisting. I wondered if she could see it, what we were hiding. Or if love made her blind. Later that night, I stood alone in the hallway, the house dark and silent. He passed me by without a word. No glance. No whisper. Just the smell of him, fading behind him like the ending of a dream. In the mirror, I looked at myself. I didn't recognize the woman staring back. She was older. Wiser, maybe. But her eyes looked tired from holding too many secrets. I wanted to ask him if he remembered our nights. The rain. The kitchen. The whispered promises in the dark. But I didn't. Some things, once said, cannot be taken back. One afternoon, I found him outside by the fence. He was looking up at the sky, as if waiting for something to fall and break the silence between us. "Are you okay?" I asked. He didn't look at me. "She's talking about the wedding again. Every day. She's excited." I nodded slowly. "She should be." There was a long pause. The wind moved between us like a wall. I waited, but he said nothing more. That night I cried. Quietly, in my room. Into my pillow. Into the sheets that still remembered him. It wasn't just desire anymore. It was grief. I knew he wouldn't leave her. And maybe I didn't want him to. I wasn't sure anymore. All I knew was that loving him had changed me forever. We met one last time, by accident or fate, I don't know. In the laundry room, our hands touched the same towel. We froze. Our eyes met. The world stilled. "I can't keep doing this," I whispered. His jaw clenched. His voice broke. "I know." But neither of us moved. Not away. Not forward. We stayed there, breathing the same air, lost in a goodbye that didn't have words. "I wish I met you first," he said finally. Tears filled my eyes. "But you didn't." He reached up and touched my face one last time. No passion. No urgency. Just a soft goodbye written in silence. Then he walked away. And I stood there alone, with a heart full of everything we couldn't keep. The wedding day arrived with bright skies and blooming flowers. Everything looked perfect. Guests filled the garden, laughter and joy floating in the air. But inside me, there was only quiet. I helped my daughter into her dress. She looked radiant, her smile wide and full of hope. "Do you think he'll cry when he sees me?" she asked. I forced a smile. "Yes, he will." He stood at the altar, hands folded, eyes steady. When he saw her walking down the aisle, his lips curved into a soft smile. I watched him closely, hoping to catch a crack in his mask. But he looked calm. The ceremony was beautiful. Vows were exchanged. Rings were slipped on fingers. Everyone clapped and cheered. I clapped too, but my heart stayed still. At the reception, they danced together for the first time as husband and wife. Their fingers intertwined. Their foreheads touched. They looked like love was easy, like it had never been complicated. I kept to the corner of the garden, sipping wine slowly. The music played, people laughed, and no one saw me slipping away into my thoughts. Later that evening, he approached me quietly. "Thank you for everything," he said, his voice calm, polite, almost distant. I nodded. "You make her happy. That's what matters." He opened his mouth to say more, but then stopped. He just gave a small, knowing look and walked away. I watched them leave together that night. Hand in hand, smiles wide. A new beginning for them. An ending for me. The days that followed were strange. The house felt too quiet, too still. I wandered from room to room, wondering what to do with all the memories. Sometimes I stood in the rain, like I had that night with him, letting the cold drops wash over me, as if they could rinse away the ache that still sat in my chest. Other times I lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, remembering his voice, his touch, his goodbye, and wondering if I'd ever feel that kind of fire again. One morning, I picked up a pen and started writing. Not letters to him, but to myself. Words to help me remember who I was before the storm, before the silence. I wrote about love, about longing, about mistakes. And slowly, something inside me began to shift. The hurt didn't disappear, but it became softer, quieter. Weeks turned into months. I started to smile again. I began cooking for myself, buying flowers, listening to music without crying. I was learning to let go, not of him, but of the dream I had held onto. I still carried his memory, but I no longer let it carry me. The mornings began to feel lighter. I still woke up early, but not with heaviness in my chest. I would open the curtains, let the sunlight in, and breathe a little deeper. I started walking again, just around the neighborhood, with no destination. The air felt cleaner. The flowers smelled sweeter. I was beginning to notice the world again. One afternoon, I saw an old friend at the market. She hugged me tightly and said, "You look different, peaceful." I smiled, surprised that someone else could see the quiet change inside me. I invited her for tea the next day. We sat in the garden, speaking of simple things, books, food, childhood stories. I laughed for the first time in weeks, a full laugh that came from my chest. The sound of it startled me. I had forgotten what it felt like to laugh without pain underneath. I held on to that feeling like a small treasure. Sometimes at night, his memory would return. I would feel the pull of it. The way he looked at me touched me, whispered into the silence. But now I let the memory pass like a soft wave. I didn't try to hold on to it anymore. Instead, I would whisper, "Thank you," into the dark and close my eyes. I had loved. I had lost. But I was still here. My daughter called often. She was happy. Married life suited her. Her voice was always full of plans and excitement. That gave me peace. She asked once, "Do you ever feel lonely?" I paused before answering. Sometimes. But I'm learning to enjoy my own company. She didn't ask more, and I was thankful. One rainy afternoon, I baked a cake for no reason. I danced in the kitchen to music I hadn't played in years. The warmth of the oven, the scent of vanilla, it wrapped around me like comfort. I looked at myself in the mirror. Not to find flaws, not to see age, but to say, "You're still here. You've survived." I touched my face gently, like greeting an old friend. I started writing again. Not just letters, but small poems and stories. Words poured from me like water finally released from a dam. It felt good. It felt healing. A neighbor waved at me one morning. He was kind, gentle in his way. We spoke about the weather, then about life. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was a beginning. One day, I sat in the garden as the sun set. A cup of tea in hand, a soft breeze on my skin. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. Because I had loved deeply. Because I had hurt and healed. And because I had found myself again, not in someone else's arms, but in my own quiet strength. My eyes locked onto his. I wanted him to remember that look forever. But dreams slip away like whispers in the wind. On her second morning back, the world felt different. She moved around the kitchen, humming gently, spinning like a breeze. Her cheeks glowed. He sat beside her at the island, his smile blooming slowly, like sunrise. I stood at the sink, soap still on my hands, my heart aching as I watched them. When her fingers touched his, he pulled back a little. That small movement said so much. She felt it too. A betrayal not yet spoken, but present, quiet, and waiting. That evening, I climbed the stairs to his room. I waited in the hallway until she went to shower. Music played faintly. I took his wrist and pulled him into the guest room. I pressed him to the door and whispered softly. He didn't ask why. He just kissed me like he had waited forever. I can't stop, he breathed against my lips. Then don't, I whispered back, already pulling at his belt. His mouth touched my shoulder. My hands tangled in his hair. The floor creaked beneath us, reminding us how close danger was. You're going to destroy me, he whispered. You already said that, I answered, my breath trembling. We rushed forward, lost in each other, trying to escape what was coming. I bit into his shoulder to muffle my cries as he trembled above me. Silence wrapped around us, thick and heavy. It wasn't peaceful, it was full of unspoken truths. The next morning, she was changed. Softer. Quieter. She made coffee with care. She didn't touch him. When she looked at me, her eyes were calm, too calm. I was no longer part of her heart. As the sun fell, I stood in front of the mirror. My robe hung open. I saw the marks he left on my thighs, the memory of his mouth on my skin. I touched those places and stepped into the hallway, trying not to cry. He didn't come that night. No knock. No whisper. Just silence. I waited, pacing, opening and closing the door, hoping. Not because I missed his touch, but because his silence screamed of choices made. Maybe he chose her. Or maybe guilt won. He smiled beside her again, laughing at her phone screen. I stood in the kitchen, feeling like a stranger. She offered me coffee. Her voice was sweet, but her eyes said something darker. That afternoon, he found me in the garden. I knelt near the lavender, my hands shaking. He knelt beside me and whispered, "It's time to end this." "You already did," I said, not meeting his eyes. He touched my hand gently. It was more than I ever expected. I laughed bitterly. It was never fair. But it mattered. He looked over the garden. She asked if I was happy. "She already knows the answer," I whispered. He left without another word. And when she asked me, days later, "Is he sharing your bed?" I said nothing. But the truth had already bloomed in her silence. I sat there, still and quiet, as her question echoed in my chest. "Is he sharing your bed?" It was sharp, but her voice didn't shake. Mine did, though, inside where she couldn't see. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. The truth had already shown itself in the way I couldn't look her in the eye. She didn't press me for an answer. She didn't need to. Her fingers played gently with the edge of her napkin. Her jaw was tight, but her hands were calm. She wasn't crying. That somehow hurt more. "I knew something changed," she said softly. "Since that weekend. Since I came home and felt like everything had moved without me." I looked down at my coffee cup. The warmth had faded. Just like the safety I once felt when she called me Mom. Now it sounded like a word from another life. "It wasn't supposed to happen," I whispered, almost to myself. "I didn't plan it. I didn't expect to feel anything." She looked at me then. Her eyes were so much older than they should have been. Eyes that had seen too much, too soon. But you did. You felt something. I nodded slowly, ashamed. Yes. And he did too, she said, not asking. Just knowing. That kind of knowing that doesn't need proof. Only a gut feeling and silence that answers louder than words. The sound of forks and plates around us felt like noise from another world. I wanted to stop time. Go back. Undo it all. But time only moves forward, dragging us with it. She stood up then. Took her bag, her keys, her heartbreak. You are not my mother anymore, she said quietly, like she was giving away a part of herself just to survive. I didn't stop her. I couldn't. I just sat there, hands in my lap, heart in pieces. Watching her walk away was like watching the last light leave the sky. Back home, the house felt empty. Not just because she was gone, but because the truth had emptied it of everything soft and familiar. Lucas was nowhere to be found. I wasn't sure if I wanted him to come back. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of choices that couldn't be taken back. I touched the pillow beside me. It still smelled like him. I whispered into the dark, I loved you too much and lost everything. But no one answered. The silence was my only reply, and it felt like it would never leave. The days after she left felt like walking through fog. I moved through the house slowly, touching the things she left behind, her scarf on the chair, her cup by the sink. Everything whispered her name. I no longer heard Lucas's footsteps in the hall. His laughter, once filling every corner, was gone. The silence became my companion, heavy and cold. I would sit on the porch each evening, staring at the street, half hoping he might walk back, say something, explain, hold me. But nothing came, not even a message. At night, I curled into the emptiness of my bed, remembering the warmth of his body, his breath against my skin, the way he once whispered, "You make me forget everything." Now I was the one left remembering everything. My daughter's absence was louder than words. Her smile didn't live here anymore. The house was too quiet. The wedding was off. The plans had vanished like smoke in the wind. I kept her postcards short, polite, cold. Hope you're well. Weather's nice here. Never, I miss you. Never, I forgive you. But still, I clung to them like they were a part of her heart. One morning, I stood by the garden, touching the lavender with trembling hands. I had once knelt there, pretending to prune, while Lucas whispered goodbye. Now the flowers felt like a memory I couldn't bury. I tried to cook one evening, just for myself, but the sound of one plate on the table made me cry. I couldn't swallow. The food stayed untouched. The hunger was no longer in my stomach, it lived deeper now. Lucas never came back. And maybe that was the right thing. Maybe he knew the damage couldn't be undone. Maybe he chose her. Or maybe he just ran, afraid of what we had destroyed. I walked into her old room one afternoon. The bed still made. The scent of her perfume still hiding in the air. I sat on the edge, and for the first time in days, I wept openly. I wasn't crying for him. I was crying for her, for the child I raised, who now looked at me like a stranger. For the bond one broke with one selfish choice. A neighbor once said, "Time heals." But she never said how long time needed. I waited. I breathed. I kept living. But some days, I still felt broken. I started writing again, pages filled with sorrow, truth, apology. Letters I'd never send. I wrote her name over and over, wishing I could go back to when she was little and still trusted me with her whole heart. I didn't know if she would ever forgive me, but I knew I would wait for a sign, a word, a chance. Even if it took years, I'd wait. Because love, even when broken, still lives. And a mother's heart, once shattered, still hopes, softly, quietly, every single day. Days turned into weeks. The house stayed quiet. No laughter, no footsteps, just the ticking clock on the wall and the sound of my own breathing. Every morning, I made a cup of tea and sat by the window. I watched the birds fly and the sky change colors, wondering if she was looking at the same sky somewhere else. I cleaned her room gently, as if touching her things might bring her back. I folded the clothes she left behind, smelling them softly. They still held her scent, sweet and familiar. I missed her voice. The way she used to say, "Mom," like it was full of love. Now that word felt far away, lost in anger and silence. Lucas was gone too. No calls. No messages. Maybe he was ashamed. Maybe he couldn't face what we did. A part of me missed him. But a bigger part just wanted peace. I wrote letters to my daughter every night. I never sent them. I kept them in a box under my bed. Each letter held a piece of my heart, a quiet apology, a hope that she might forgive me one day. Sometimes I walked through the garden barefoot. I touched the flowers we once planted together. I whispered her name into the wind, hoping it would reach her somehow. The neighbors started talking less. I could feel their eyes when I went to the store. They smiled, but their smiles felt empty. They knew. Or maybe they only guessed. Either way, I carried the shame like a heavy coat. One morning, I found a postcard in the mailbox. It was from her. Just a few words, "Hope you're eating well." "I'm okay." I held it to my chest and cried. It wasn't much, but it was something. She thought of me. She wrote to me. That gave me a small light in the darkness. I replied the next day. I didn't talk about Lucas. I just told her I missed her. I told her the lavender was blooming. I told her I loved her. Weeks passed. Then one day she called. Her voice was calm, but distant. She didn't say she forgave me. She didn't say she was coming home. But she talked. And I listened. And that was enough. We talked more after that. Slowly. Carefully. Like walking on glass. But at least we were walking. I still carry the pain. I still cry at night. But I smile more now too. Because even though everything changed, love still stayed. And maybe one day, when she's ready, she'll walk through that door. And when she does, I'll be waiting with open arms and a heart full of hope. You embark on your next adventure, remember to give a thumbs up to the video, subscribe to the channel, and activate those notifications so you won't miss the tale that awaits you next. Thank you for joining me on this journey.